Hi everyone, it's Vanessa. I'm here to wrap up all of the books that I ended up reading in the month of March. I ended up reading, I think, almost 12 middle grade books, celebrating middle grade March, and then I read 4 adult books. So I'll first talk about all of the middle grade, and then I'll talk a little bit about my adult reads. All of the graphic novels, I ended up reading 3 of them. 2 mixed results, I would say. The first one of the ones that I picked up was Garlic and the Witch. Really nice palette cleanser, really nice, cozy, simple. The main characters are all like plants and vegetables. There is also like a witch, and there is like a count, like a vampire in the story as well, coming together, solving problems and adventures and things like that. I did think that the first book in the series was better. They're just a companion series, so really it didn't seem like you had to have read the first one for this one to make sense. They kind of stood on their own. Cute, not anything life-changing, 3 stars. I feel like I read these 2 back to back, and reading them together told me things about each other and like which one did a better job. So one of them is Uprooted by Ruth Chan, and I've read her picture books before, so her illustration style is reminiscent of things that I've seen in her picture books. This is a story about her moving from Canada back to Hong Kong. I think it's Hong Kong. Yes, Hong Kong. Basically starting over, and her family's kind of going in different directions. Her brother stays behind to go to school. Her dad is like traveling to a different country because of his company, and then her mom is like reconnecting with all of her family and all of her friends, so she kind of feels a little bit left behind, making her own life in Hong Kong, learning about customs there and about her family and feeling more comfortable speaking that language. The narrative story didn't deliver as well as Continental Drifter, and they both have very similar topics. So Continental Drifter by Kathy McLeod is her going from Thailand to Maine every year, and she always really looks forward to it. I think she feels more a fish out of water in Maine, even though she loves it for its beauty. She loves it for visiting family from her dad's side, but she does feel like she doesn't fit in because she doesn't look like the people that live in Maine. And this one just came across more vulnerable and raw and honest, and I think the writing in this one is a little bit better in delivering that like narrative and emotional importance to the story that I look for in graphic memoirs. So out of these 2, I think that Continental Drifter did a better job, but I think that they're both good ones to pick up. I would say maybe Uprooted is a little bit funnier than Continental Drifter. I gave this one 3 stars and I gave this one 4 stars. Then I want to talk about all of the regular chapter books, like regular stories, and the first one that I want to talk about I don't have with me, so I want to talk about it first before I forget it, and that is FRINDLE by Andrew Clements. This is one that I squeaked in at the last moment of during middle grade March. I thought maybe I wouldn't get to it because I had to return my physical copy back to the library, and then I was waiting for my audiobook copy. It's a story that I never grew up with. My husband, like he had memories of reading it in elementary school, so I was excited to get to it. It's my second Andrew Clements book. This I felt held up. I thought that for being such an older story, I picked it for the challenge of being published in the 90s. I thought that it really held up. I thought that the main character still had that class clown with a good heart archetype. The author did a really good job at making us care about him, but also like seeing how what he's doing is trying to titillate and poke the grown-ups in his life. And of course it's like a good teacher-student story as well, of like a teacher believing in a student, in his ingenuity and like what his imagination can bring to the world. Basically, he starts using the word frindle for pen, and it's a way of talking about how like words get made and like how they get included into the dictionary, and how it kind of takes over the town and all the kids start calling pens frindles to make the grown-ups mad, basically, until it becomes just like a part of normal life. And I definitely recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. I also have The Year We Fell from Space by Amy Sarig King. I think overall this ended up being one of the less successful chapter books that I read for middle grade March, because I didn't really know where we were going with this. Amy Sarig King is A.S. King, by the way. I didn't know that when I picked up this book. So she writes a lot of books for teens, and I've read some of her teen books before. I've never read a middle grade by her. She in general writes like grittier or darker things, and this story I think is to a T darker than normal middle grade. In it we're following like a family that is going through divorce. The dad is moving out, and he seems to be having some mental health struggles that aren't really put on the page for us to know what it is that's truly going on with him. And the mom is very caring and understanding of where the dad is coming from, and the girls kind of don't get it. The girls are, the two sisters are angry at her dad because they feel like he is not making them like the integral #1 important thing in their life. He's got other things going on, and he's kind of a little bit selfish in that way. There are some like elements in the story which I think don't help the mental health discussions, where the main character like sees a rock that comes down like a meteorite and then like collects it and puts it in her room, and it's like ginormous, and she like carries it into her room. And then just like the way that it is written in the story, it's not certain to me as the reader reading this if it's real or not, and that was kind of confusing. I did like the two sisters together. I liked their discussions with each other. I liked the mom and her discussions with the daughters. I thought that those were really healthy conversations. Ultimately, like, it ended well, and yeah, it just didn't deliver 100%, and I gave it 3 stars. I also read The Year of Billy Miller by Kevin Henkes. This one was really, really lovely. I listened to it mostly on audiobook, and I do think that that's a good way to go because the story is so wholesome. I think that they come across really cozy in the audiobook versions of it. This is following Billy Miller as he's going to school, and he's like growing up a little bit, feeling like he doesn't need his parents as much anymore, and in it he starts doing things to kind of gain independence from them in ways like, I don't want to walk with you all the way to school, I want to call you something else other than daddy. Ultimately, like, noticing through his struggles in school with his teachers and his friends and like class projects that they're doing, it's like really low stakes here. Like, they're just making what are they called, dioramas. So of course the parents come back in the end and like really lift up Billy. The ending is really, really sweet. It's a really sweet moment between him and his mom. So just very cute, and I really enjoy the series, and I'm definitely gonna read the other ones in the series as well. I gave it 4 stars. I also read The Lost Library by Rebecca Stead and Wendy Mass. In my TBR, I talked about like my trepidation about this book being possibly too fantastical, kind of like Bob, which is the other book by these 2 authors that I've read. There are elements in the story that are a little bit fantastical, having to do with ghosts, but I think that the story worked much better than Bob did for me because I love the rest of the plot. It has to do with a library that burned down, and now there's like a little free library that's kind of popping up, and people don't really know where it came from or what's going on with that. The main character in the story finds a book that is from when the fire happened, basically, and it unleashes like this mystery of like, why did this library burn down, and like who's at fault, and trying to figure out who might be the cause of it. It's just like an interesting look at that small town dynamic with library and books at the center of it, which is really cozy and sweet. There's also like a cat, there's like mice, there's like other animals in the story that have like a big part in the story, kind of in the fashion of Catherine Applegate and how animal characters have feelings and emotions. So those were really sweet characters as well. I like figuring out what happened at the end. I felt like I needed a little bit more from the mystery. Yeah, I ended up rating it 4 stars, but it was like on its way to be a 5-star, and then I didn't think that it like finished the book off as strong as I wanted it to. The next one is one that I loved. I really, really loved this book, and this is a book where I feel like the page count works in its favor because I read some shorter books that I didn't feel like worked all the way, like this one. Could have been a little bit longer, I feel like, but this one was like the perfect amount of text, and it's a shorter book. It's definitely for early middle grade readers, so this is definitely for like the 1st through 3rd grade, and it's called Felix Powell Boy Dog. This is a new one by Erin and Estrada Kelly. I'm really excited about this being a series. I read the first book in her other younger kids series, maybe Marisol Renée, and enjoyed it, but I love this one so much more. I really think she got into the mindset of a younger child. I just think like the adventure, what's going on in the story is quirky and sweet. So the main character, Felix, ends up finding a blanket from a thrift store that makes him turn into a dog for an afternoon, basically. It's him hanging out with his dog and trying to figure out like, what are the awesome things about being a dog? If you're a dog lover, I think you would enjoy that. And then the 2 dogs end up deciding like, how are we gonna turn Felix back into a boy? So very sweet story. Really loved it. 5 stars. I read Bloomability by Sharon Creech, another one that I read towards the end of middle grade March. This one didn't deliver what I wanted all the way. I enjoyed it for what it was. The thing about this book that didn't hit me as much as I wanted it to is the characters and like family elements in the story. That didn't hit me in the way that it did in Walk Two Moons. The thing that I liked the most was that boarding school element, adventure aspect of it more. She's basically like plucked out of her family, and you don't really see her interacting with her family except via like letters. The found family, which is her aunt and uncle, didn't really have that much of a part in the story that I thought that they would. So it's more about her finding friends in this like international school, and all of the kids are from different backgrounds, which I enjoyed that too. I just wanted the emotional family characters to hit me a little bit more than they did. So this one was 3 stars for me. My last one in my pile of regular chapter books is Lucky Broken Girl by Ruth Behar. This is the book that I started my month out with. I ended up really enjoying this one and I gave it 4 stars. It's a historical fiction. It follows like many of Ruth Behar's stories, an immigrant family. The main character is called Ruthie, so Ruth, and it takes inspiration from something that happened to Ruth Behar when she was younger, where she broke her leg. I think in the story it's like a little bit more extreme. What I found when I was reading like reviews about this book is a lot of people were annoyed by Ruthie's complaining or like melodrama. I don't really get that as a criticism of this book, because she is a child. She was basically bedridden as a result of the accident for like more than a year, and also like a lot of guilt and emotions that she is thinking about the person who crashed into their car. The melodrama of like the family, I just feel like that's something that maybe people who aren't immigrants or don't have Hispanic parents, they don't connect with that because that's not like their upbringing. I feel like I've had conversations about this recently with colleagues. I really like that story because it's something that like I could see my family members being like or acting like, and they can't really see that, and I just think that that's just like a different experience. That's why I love reading about Hispanic and Latino main characters, because I do feel a connection and a relatability to that. Also comes to the story because of the neighborhood aspects of it. It is such a community-filled immigrant story. Like everybody in the neighborhood is coming from a different area, and it's like European immigrants but also like Latino immigrants and Asian immigrants, and they're all kind of coming together in this neighborhood and leaning on each other, having parties with each other. And I think that's also a really, really important part of many of Behar's books. This is the second one that I've read, and I just feel that is something that she values a lot when she writes a story. Now I have 3 books in verse. We're going to start with my lowest rated, which is kind of sad, and it's the follow-up to Inside Out and Back Again. It's When Clouds Touch Us by Thanhhà. In this book, we're following the character from the first story, from Inside Out and Back Again, which I think takes inspiration from her own upbringing and her moving to United States. In the story, they move from Alabama to Texas. Part of it seems like for better career prospects, and so all the family moves. I found that this was very stilted in the writing. A lot of like the poetic aspects of it are very descriptive, but they don't really evoke the emotions to like make me understand what's happening in the story and with the characters. It was more like vivid imagery for the sake of vivid imagery. It felt like I went back to my review of Inside Out and Back Again, and I realized that I only rated it 3 stars. I think just because how people love that story, I feel like the way that it's like remembered in my brain is different than my own experience of reading it many years ago, probably I don't know, 8 years ago at this point. So reading this one, I was like, well, maybe I should just have never picked it up, because I didn't love the first one as much as I thought that I did, or like that I remembered. Then a more successful one, I read It's All or Nothing Vale by Andrea Beatriz Arango. I gave it 4 stars ultimately, and I thought that it was stronger than the previous book by this author that I read, which is FELIX Explains It All, another book that's in verse. This one felt stronger because the character was stronger. The voice of the character really stood out. A character that I had struggles with because just her passion and her drive for fencing when she is injured and in pain is not something that I get, because I didn't grow up with sports. But the more that the book went on, the more I started to understand where she was coming from. It's like everything that she's known, it's what she's known for. She doesn't want people to perceive her differently because she can no longer perform at that same level. I think this is also another trend in middle grade that I've read a lot recently that I think is something I don't know, writers are just popping off writing like injury stories, writing about sports, what to do where like the idea that you had for your future with sports isn't happening anymore. The main character is also having thoughts of having a crush on this like rival at her fencing group that is just so sweet and lovely, and so it's kind of funny because she's very grumpy, not wanting to give in that like this is the person that's going to replace her as like the best in fencing in their area, but then ultimately realizing like she's just so kind and so sweet and so loving and giving that it just breaks down those walls that she has about being so grumpy towards her. I really enjoyed the other family members, but particularly the brother of VALE and the life advice that he gives her. I also really enjoyed all of the food, and there's like dancing too, so they dance like salsa and things like that, and those like little touch points of heritage also I enjoyed in this book. And then last but not least, let's leave off with my favorite read of middle grade March. Is also a book in verse, and it is Renee Watson's new book, All the Blues in the Sky. Oh man, how much I love this book. Definitely a 5-star read. Definitely one that out of all of this pile, I definitely recommend. Like if you want something sweet and funny, go for Felix Powell. If you want something that like breaks your heart and puts it back together again, makes you bawl in bed like it did for me, definitely pick this one up. It's heartbreaking, but it's also heartrending and inspiring. It just really shows you the power of writing to elicit emotions in you. The main character in the story has lost a friend in an accident as the friend was going to see her for her birthday party. So the main character feels doubly guilty that they were en route to go spend time with them, and if they hadn't been, they would probably still be alive. And just like the like second by second happening of something like that, where if she had left 5 minutes later or 5 minutes earlier, this probably wouldn't have happened. Like those feelings that the main character is dealing and grappling with are so raw. So in the story, she ends up going to like a grief therapy group, and all of the kids that are in this group lost people in their life, but the main character views them different than herself because many of them have lost people in their life through things that were like an expected death. And she wrongly believes that her loss hurts more. She has a really lovely relationship with Aunt Amy, so she starts spending a lot of time with her and hearing from her perspective too of just like how she deals with grief. That struggle, that human struggle, is in all of us, and we will all face something like this at some point. Renee Watson has a lovely like addendum to the end where she talks about where the story came from and how during the height of COVID she lost a lot of family members. That grief compounded and added onto itself. This story came from that. Beautiful writing. That's like the standout here, is that the writing is going to make you feel things. 5 stars. And now, last but not least, let's talk about the 4 books that I read that are not middle grade books. This was more like my mood reading part of middle grade March because my TBR was solely middle grade. I picked up some adult books. Like for example, I finally finished Intermezzo by Sally Rooney after like having started the audiobook. Then like my audiobook hold elapsed and I had to put it back on hold and wait again on another really long line for it so that I could finish like the last 3 hours of the audiobook. I feel like this story wasn't as strong as Normal People. I think it was bloated. All of Sally Rooney's books are getting longer and longer, and I feel like diminishing returns in that sometimes. I also didn't really love the characters in this book. What were the brothers' names? It was like Ivan and Peter, right? Ivan was the character that I most liked reading from. He was the like chess player, and he's the younger brother of the two, and he gets like in a relationship with an older woman in the story. And the other brother, Peter, he's a lawyer, like he's more successful than Ivan, and he has like this weird relationship with a girlfriend that he had for a really long time who went through some health struggles, and now he's like basically taking up with a girl that he kind of is like the sugar daddy for a little bit, but he deep down does like her company. I didn't really like the love dynamic between Peter and his 2 situations, and I did not like the ending of that, like the resolution of that. I did enjoy Ivan's part in the story more from the perspective of don't care what other people think and live the life that makes you happy. Ultimately, I didn't think that the grief elements played as strongly in this book as I thought that they would. They had some conversations about losing their father, and I feel like that's the way that this book is pitched, is like that's the main thing that's happening in the story. I felt like they were just living their lives with this like in the background, and I thought that that would have a more prominent part in the story. So I think I ended up rating it 3 stars. I really enjoy millennial fiction. It's something that I read a lot of. I'm having this struggle with myself after I finished that book of recognizing if I'm a Rooney millennial girl or if I'm a millennial girl for other authors instead. Reading this like so closely with rejection, that worked so much better for me. Then I also read a memoir called The Well-Trained Wife, which was in my TBR the month before, and I realized after I made that TBR I never put that book on hold on Libby, so then I had to wait for the audiobook hold to come in. So it finally came in just a month late for my other TBR. I did enjoy my time learning about the author's life. This is a narrative nonfiction book about growing up basically in a like fundamentalist sect of Christianity, her leaving her abusive marriage that started when she was really young, barely 20, and she had kids right soon thereafter. She is part of a sect of Christianity that believes basically in having as many kids as possible, very similar to the Duggar family. And also after reading my book and looking back at my TBR, I talked about Shiny Happy People, the documentary on Amazon, and she was actually featured in that documentary, and I didn't even know when I was making my TBR that I was talking about something that she was already connected to. So she left her marriage after being in it for like 2 decades and having multiple children. She talks a lot about losing a child in pregnancy, as well as just like her escape, because at the end of it, it was basically like a domestic abuse situation where she had to escape and hope that he wouldn't find her and her children to kill them. Very, very heavy. The way that it's written, it is very propulsive. The last fourth is not as propulsive because she's a little bit more vague about her life at the present moment. She talks about like relationships that she's been in after this marriage. She has really interesting insights into the Quiverful movement. Thoughts and conversations with other women in the movement I think are fascinating. Also like how popular the idea of the trad wife is at the moment online. I think this is a great thing to read for that. If you liked reading memoirs, I think it was good. It was a good memoir, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I also read The Lost and the Found, and this was a memoir slash reporting book on homelessness. The author is a reporter for a newspaper in San Francisco, and he had been a reporter there for many decades, so he's seen the homelessness situation change in San Francisco. It focuses on 2 particular people that he met in his reporting, and he kind of writes more of their life stories in full, how they ended up on the streets. Both of them go through periods of like getting off the streets, getting off of drugs, and going through withdrawal with that, and going to like treatment centers to help them with that. Kind of like the success and failures that come from that, which definitely not everybody's going to succeed in that. I think ultimately that this book is too focused on like the reporting aspect and not enough focused on like the bigger complex issues at hand, that there are many factors that coalesce with each other, make people make decisions for themselves in their lives that are detrimental to their health, their housing. I think what I concluded is that I need to pick up less books by reporters. Like for example, this reminded me of a book by another reporter that I read a couple nonfiction Novembers ago called You Ought to Do a Story About Me by Ted Jackson, I think was the author's name. What they're talking about is what they see on the ground. They focus more on like feel-good stories, like human interest stories. I think that's all well and good, but I think personally I like the stories that are a little bit more focused on the factors that are affecting the reasoning for this to happen. And that includes books like Matthew Desmond's Evicted or An Invisible Child. I feel like the author's name is Andrea something. Andrea Elliott, maybe? Which is a book about a family facing homelessness in the Brooklyn area. Those look more, yes, at the reporting of like individual people's stories, but then they also talk about the things that are affecting their income, causing friction for them to not lead a successful life where they do have housing. The last book that I want to talk about was, I don't really want to talk about it because it was kind of a dud, and it's I'm Laughing Because I'm Crying, and this is a book that I mentioned in my 2024 books that I missed out on that I was looking forward to. I picked this one up in a mood reading feeling of I want to pick up a memoir and hopefully something that's kind of funny and an immigrant story. I just think that I didn't get on with the writing of this book. I ended up rating this book 2 stars. I was really disappointed by how like nonchalant and conversational it was in the audiobook version. It's like a podcaster reading a book out loud about their life. There's a point in the book where she's like, so anyway, back to the story, and like that's just the vibe that came across. It's not very polished. I just think I wanted it to be a little bit more introspective and well thought out in the writing. I also think that the humor does not land with me. I think that her humor pushes a little bit more boundaries than my humor does, though I do understand where it comes from, and it comes from a way of protecting yourself through trauma and difficult moments in your life. So I appreciate her candor. She is very honest in the book, and I feel like I got to know things that I did not need to know. Some of the tougher things that she talks about, she like steps on herself talking about it. Maybe because she is trying to be funny, some of the more serious topics don't get the care that they should. I was kind of thinking in my head it would be something like Saigon, which is a book that I love, an immigrant memoir that I loved, that does have like funny elements to it and like self-deprecating aspects to the immigrant experience, but it was just a lot more touching and emotional than I'm laughing because I'm crying was. Thank you so much for watching my video. Hopefully you got some new recommendations. If you've made it to the end of this video, leave me a flower emoji because we are excited for spring. I had to turn on my lights for this video because it's raining. It's been raining all day so far. Hopefully a lot of more blooming will happen. I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.